Welcome to the City of Saginaw's budget program on the 2013-2014 city budget. With me today is Darnell Earley, City Manager, Tim Morales, Deputy City Manager, Chief Financial Officer, Phil Ludos, Assistant City Manager for Public Safety, and Yolanda Jones, Assistant to the City Manager, Budget Administrator. Mr. Earley, let's begin by noting that shrinking revenues are a problem for cities across the country, and Saginaw is no exception. Could you tell us how you will focus on stability and solvency?
Well, that's an issue we've been dealing with for certainly the 7 years that I've been in this role. So it's an ongoing exercise in how to balance revenues and expenditures. One of the things that has helped us in dealing with that is our ability to monitor on a regular basis our expenditures and our revenues and income. And so when we take a look at that, we have a pretty good idea of what we can project the expenditures will be and what the revenues will be. And that's critical to getting to the end of the fiscal year, which for 2013 now is coming up in about 6 weeks. And because we've monitored our budget and managed our budget process and our expenditure plan, we have a pretty good idea of where we are financially. So it's key to understanding the financial reporting responsibilities and making sure that the payables or the receivables that are due to you are received, and just a number of things. But more importantly than that, it's a bunch of people doing a lot of things. It's not just one individual. It's, you know, it can be the CFO, it can be the budget analyst, it can be the individual department heads, all the way down to the employees that collect the revenues that come in. So it's a teamwork approach to managing our financial house and keeping that in order. And what happens is that when those revenues continue to decline, then you have to come up with ways in which to manage the expenditure side. The expenditure side of the budget is more manageable than the revenue side. I mean, and that's what we've gone through each budget year, is trying to manage our expenditures through cost containment, innovative and alternative ways of service delivery, and making sure that we're getting the most effective use of our financial and human resources. So it's a combination of things, and it's my job as a city manager to make sure that all of those things are working in harmony to keep the city solvent. And so that's been our challenge for a number of years now. And you're absolutely right, it's no different in many other urban areas, just like Saginaw, that face the same level of challenge.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. It's interesting, Mr. Morales. Could you tell us how we got here?
Well, over the last 30 years since 1980, the city's lost about 34% of its population, down to around 50 or 51,000 people. At the same time, the city has kept pace in reducing the number of employees, has gone from 1,100 employees to just around 400. However, something that we haven't been able to control is the revenue coming into the city. We've had significant decreases in revenue, especially statutory revenue sharing, and that has in fact gone down $2 million in 1 year when the state switched from statutory revenue sharing to EVIP, and it's come up a little bit expected for 2014, and overall in the past 5 years we see a decline of about $1.5 million. Combined with that, we've also had drastic increases in legacy costs. And that's one of our primary problems that we need to address. Those are all related to retiree health care benefits and pension costs, things that were done several years ago that we're now seeing the effects of.
Okay. It's interesting when you've got that much of a reduction in revenue. How do you make up for it? Where do you have to cut? How do you make up that revenue? And why are the cuts being made in public safety?
Well, as the manager stated, it's difficult to make up the revenue once it's reduced by the state, or when property tax revenue goes down. It's difficult to make it up. So you tend to focus on the expenditure side of things. Public safety in the city of Saginaw for the past several years has been about 2/3 of our total expenditures. And it's still the most significant portion of the budget for fiscal year 2014. It's still well over 60%. We are focusing on there at this time because over the past 30 years, many of the other departments have been severely cut or even eliminated. Several years ago, the city had a very strong Parks and Recreation department. That is minimal now. We used to spend general fund money on streets. We no longer do that. We have outsourced the attorney's office, accounting functions to save money. So we have to be very careful about where we reduce expenditures related to employees so that we don't have the unintended effect of additionally reducing revenue.
Okay, well, what about our rainy day fund?
Well, the fact is we don't have a rainy day fund any longer. We had a budget stabilization fund for a number of years. That money has been shifted back to the general fund reserve to work with accounting rules that we have. So currently our general fund reserve is about $1.2 million, or it was at the end of fiscal year 2012, our most recent audit. $1.2 million represents about 3.8% of our general fund expenditures. Ideally, you would like to have, or not even ideally, I guess minimally, you'd like to have 10%. So we should have about $3.1 million going into fiscal year 14 in reserve. And ideally, we would like to have 15 to 20% just for cash flow issues and other unexpected expenditures that come up in the general fund.
Well, thank you for explaining all that. I'd like Yolanda Jones now, if she would, to explain the different funds that make up the city budget.
Great. The 2014 citywide budget is going to be $129.99 million. There are 5 different fund types that makes up that total citywide budget. Our largest and only discretionary fund is our general fund. And this is where you're going to see general operations like public safety, assessing, financial management, some of the public services, and then general government, so like council and that. So that's your only discretionary fund. The second fund type is called the special revenue funds. This fund, basically, the monies that you receive in for a specific purpose will be utilized in this fund. For example, our public safety millage. We passed a 7.5 millage for public safety services. Because of the accounting principles, it must be recognized in its own special fund. Another example would be your rubbish collection fund. The third type, which is 45% of your total citywide budget, is your enterprise funds. And you need to look at this as a business type activity. So say somebody comes in to pay their water bill. All the monies that you would receive for that payment must go back into the system. Another fund would be, a part of that would be your sewer fund. Another type of fund would be your internal service fund. So you have to look at that as your central services. An example would be IS. They provide all the technological services for the city. So user departments would pay into that fund specifically. And the final type would be your fiduciary funds. So this would be like your police and fire pension. These funds we manage, but we can't use the monies other than what it was intended for. So each year we receive a pension valuation that we must pay. Another thing that probably should be pointed out is that we are required by state law, the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act, which is Public Act 621 of 1978, to account for the way that we first develop our budget as well as administer our budget.
Okay, so there really is no easy way to just take money from one fund and put it in another. You're restricted, you can't do that. What the money comes in for is what it is spent for.
Correct.
Okay. Well, since we have all that money, what I'd like to know is, do we have any bonded fund debt?
Well, the city has been very frugal about entering into debt, particularly debt that is not offset by revenues that are specifically earmarked for that. Our general obligation debt is very marginal. In fact, I don't think we have any from a bonded standpoint. I think we may still have some installments that are still out there. But on the revenue side, on the enterprise side, we did bond for some specific repairs and modernization and improvements to our waste and water facilities. But those bonds, the cost for servicing those is directly related to the fees charged. So our general bonded indebtedness is very low, and where we have that debt, we have the revenues to cover it. We do have some capital needs and projects for improvement. I think we've made it very clear to the public that our building is in bad need of repair, and some of our other auxiliary buildings are as well. And that's because over the years, when we've tried to manage budgets, and even before I became city manager, capital programs or projects were probably not as prevalent as they may have been in earlier years. And so as a result of that, your facilities need attention, and that's where we are now. So this is a good time for us to do that if we can just convince the voters to secure those bonds with a resultant fee that will amount to the ability to service that debt. So I guess the short answer is we don't have a lot of debt, and what debt we do have is covered by the revenues that come from the services provided.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, in light of what we heard, Mr. Ludos, about the general fund and the constant pressure on the budgets, can you tell me how this impacts police and fire, and how will you operate?
Well, obviously, we can afford to still fund that, but it has limitations on it. And so this year in the 2014 fiscal budget, what we're facing here is a reduction of staffing both in the police and fire departments. And those reductions were intended to balance this budget out this year. As Mr. Morales said, it nearly accounts for 2/3 of the budget. So when you start looking to balance that budget, you have to look at it proportionally. So we will reduce our staffing in both police and fire operations. We will close down at least one of the fire stations. And then what we have to do, and that is what we are doing, Brian Leip, our new police chief, and I have worked at great lengths to come up with an operational plan which we call smarter policing. We're going to depend more on technology as a source. We are getting ready, we hope to go live in about 3 months with a program where citizens can actually report online, go online and make a police report. It'll have some obviously parameters to that. A Cop Logic system where if you have an iPhone, you can, it's a free download app where citizens can be kept abreast of activities going on relative to crime and public safety issues. So we're really in an environment where we are going to have to be much smarter in how we deliver those services because of the reduction of manpower. And what that means is that when there are special events, those will be billed like other operations to those people that want the use of police services, so that we continue to pay for our work as we go, because the general fund has no way by which it can actually subsidize those activities anymore.
Okay. I was at the press conference for Chief Light, and he mentioned an Explorer program. Do you have any information on that? I think that would be something that the community would embrace.
As we move forward, Chief and I have talked about two things. There's two different programs. One is the Explorer program, which is obviously part of the scouting activity. The city had that program a number of years ago, long before I came, and it began to dysfunction because of the fact we just didn't get the young people to come into the program. The other possibility that we're looking at is a cadet program, which will bring young people into the program, 18 years of age to 21. They would be civilians, not law enforcement personnel, but it would provide us the opportunity to bring young people in and get them familiar with what law enforcement is. I think it's important in Saginaw and cities like Saginaw that you really begin to nurture the diversity through your own population, and that's real critical to where we are going in the future, and we really have to do that. So we're looking at both of those programs to begin to develop some what I'll call homegrown young people who are truly interested both in police and fire, because if we go to the Explorer program or the cadet program, we would look at it on the fire side also.
Phil, is there anything else you'd like to add?
It's important, I think, that everybody realizes our collaborative efforts with the Michigan State Police and the Sheriff's Department will also help us deliver very good services. Currently, we have 19 Michigan State Police troopers assigned to the city of Saginaw, And there is a major crimes task force made up of the sheriff, the Michigan State Police, and Saginaw detectives, and that investigates some of the major crime events. So I think, you know, that's critical, because even though we've reduced our own force, it's been supplemented by the governor and the colonel of the state police, and it has provided us actually 2 full details are assigned to the city. So I think we are going to be able to come into this new year and provide a very fine level of service for the citizens.
Well, that's good to know. Yolanda, I have another question for you. Were there any fees or rate increases in this year's budget?
Actually, there are. Talking about the special revenue funds, the rubbish collection fund is one that will realize a rate increase. The household rubbish collection fee will increase by $10. It will go from $165 to $175. Also, you'll see the compost dumping fees will increase, and this one has been long overdue. This will affect the Mid-Michigan Waste Authority and its members. They haven't raised it in years, and in further analysis, it was needed. In the general fund, you're going to see cemetery fees increase. That has already gone before council and approved, so that will begin in June. You also will see code enforcement increases, and that's plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and that's in order to align it with the state rates.
Right. Well, I know we've got a total budget of about $129 million, and we have a general fund in there. Could you tell me what percentage of the budget the general fund is?
Of course. The general fund actually represents about 24% of the total citywide budget. That's approximately $30.98 million.
Okay. And Tim, one question for you too. We know that the state has changes. I would like to know if there were any state changes that have affected the budget.
2 years ago, the state eliminated statutory revenue sharing and created a program that's called the Economic Vitality Incentive Program, EVIP. What that does is you're no longer guaranteed revenues. So when we budget our revenues, we budget reasonably assured amounts. But in order to get our EVIP portion, we have to meet specific criteria in 3 areas, including accountability and transparency, collaboration and cooperation, and employee compensation and benefits area. So we have specific items that are due to the state for each of those categories by a specific deadline. If we do not meet those, then we lose 1/3 of our proportion of EVIP, which is around $5 million, a little over $5 million for the next fiscal year.
Okay. Well, Manager Earley, you've been a manager of the city of Saginaw now for a little over 8 years. And in that time, you have balanced 8 budgets. Could you tell me what is the most difficult part of the process?
Well, the whole process itself involves so many moving parts. I think part of the difficulty is the time that it takes to make sure that everything is where it is when you're ready to adopt the budget, or to recommend it for adoption, rather. And I've been fortunate in that I've had good staff that has pretty much kept us on task with respect to timelines, because again, there's so many moving parts to a budget. We have the administrative portion, we have the implementation portion, department heads are involved, staff, I mean, throughout the organization. A number of people have to work on this document. I mean, it's not just a document that I work on, it's not just a document that the chief financial officer works on, or the budget administrator. So first of all, making sure that our plan is consistent with our spending plan is consistent with our strategic plan takes effort on the part of a lot of people too. The city council and I work together on that to make sure that our priorities are funded at the level that we can afford to fund them. And as invariably happens when we begin to put the budget together, when we look at the needs and the resources, there's always what the budget administrator refers to as a gap analysis that has to be performed. In other words, our revenues and expenditures have to be equal before we can move forward. And that is a very challenging task because we recognize we have so many needs and not enough resources to go around. So I guess it's a matter of trying to keep the service levels in a city like Saginaw at an effective level, and that becomes increasingly more difficult with the loss of revenue and the increasing cost of providing services. So one of the things that we're doing now as we look at the new model, if you will, of cities in the 21st century is we're trying to find ways to maximize our technology, our use of technology, and to make sure that everybody is a part of the process and an inclusion kind of process, because we need those resources to make sure that we're getting the jobs done. So we focus on program attainment. We look at our programs, we measure our programs and the effectiveness of those things so that we're satisfied that the few dollars that we do have are being utilized effectively. But just keeping the service levels high and having to cut the resources is a balancing act that involves a lot of people. I just want to thank the employees and the city council for the due diligence that goes into this process. A lot of hours are spent over several months, and the idea is to make sure that we're maximizing our use of the resources to impact positively the quality of life. And although it's difficult, at the end of the day, when we present a budget to the city council, it is a budget that is responsible. It is a budget that reflects our solvency and our ability to sustain those services. So despite the difficulty in getting us there, once we get there, it's pretty satisfying to know that as a team, we've pulled together a spending plan that will continue to address quality of life issues in the city of Saginaw.
Well, thank you very much. That's a lot of hard work. And I hope this program has communicated to the citizens of Saginaw what it takes to run the business of a city. And this budget program is just one way that the city of Saginaw is reaching out to the community and the community stakeholders to communicate budget information. Now, this year there will be a budget forum on the city's website where you can type your questions on budget matters and receive answers. The budget forum will be activated on May the 15th. Also on the website is a budget page with videos of the budget meetings, infographics, and this budget program to better communicate and engage all stakeholders, in the city budget. And a special thanks goes out to the Saginaw Public School District for use of their SCTV studio for the taping of today's program. Thank you very much.